Hi everybody, welcome to my newest art journal watch along video. This is for week 5 in January, and I am pretty much sick and tired of all the gray weather outside, so this is going to be my counter measurements against the weather. So I'm starting off by watering my page here, and this piece is pretty much only, or the main material, I should say, is watercolors. So I'm starting off by using all the remaining grayish bluish colors on my palette there. You can see to create a very light gray background. So the weather outside is pretty much awful, and well, this is the kind of color that I see here when I look out the window, and again, I'm sick and tired of it, so I'm going to combine this gray with some very beautiful colors that, well, are anything but drab. So I'm giving it a very solid layer here that I'm going to dry off with my blow dryer, just because I'm so impatient. And then I'm going to put the book aside and work on the piece that actually is going on top as a second layer. So I'm working with watercolors again, but I chose to add dimensions, meaning I'm going to add another layer, and that will be glued onto the page later on. So this is just a scrap piece of 220 grams watercolor paper. I'm not going to tape it down all the way because I'm going to cut what I'm going to paint later on, so I don't need to have clean borders all around of the same width, and I can just get away with taping it down just a tiny bit so that the paper doesn't warp too much. I'm using this, and now my computer binged, and I don't know why. I don't care. Sorry for the interruptions, boy. So I'm using plexiglass on the back as a board to tape it down to, because it's not sucking in anything and it actually works nicely. So I'm going in with a cold red. It could also be a magenta, a crimson red. So it's a very cool color which works nicely with a gray, but still is so vibrant and so much in your face that it really is the color against the drabness. So I'm just painting that color in. I didn't wet the surface. I don't want the color to really bleed, but I'm going to spread the color by just adding water like so. And by that I can have parts of the painting being a bit more on the fade rose color, and some parts are being really bright pink, magenta, red. So the thing that I'm creating here is actually a tulip. The tulip, in my personal opinion, is the sign for spring, and right about now we got some beautiful tulips already on the market. So when I go to the store, I sometimes buy a few of these lovely flowers just to get some spring already into my living room. There are some tulips that are really round and even and beautifully made on the petals, and then there are some that have more the rougher petals that open way wider and that do have these zigzag lines at the end of the petals. And these are the tulips that I prefer because they look less bred, more natural. Though I think it's just the other way around. These are the bred kind of tulips, but I don't know why. I just feel it's more natural if something isn't perfect, and yeah. Well, you know me. Anyways, so I'm painting one of these tulips, and most of the petals are already opened. So after a brief, like 50% drying of the painting, just so that the color doesn't bleed too much, I added a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. And that way I get a very lovely purple, which helps me defining some of the parts of the petals in that painting. And I'm going with these stroked lines and not having like it's almost like a sketchy line that I'm drawing in there with the color, which you see often as a pattern in these kinds of tulips that I'm talking about. And since the pink color is not dry all the way through, it actually partially bleeds into the pink part, and it's just a very nice way of achieving these, well, weird patterned petals there, and giving it a bit of roundness and depth that way with pretty much just two colors. It's not that difficult. So I'm going around all of the petals, and there are 4 that you can see here. So in the middle, the one that I'm just working on is petal 1. I'm adding, by the way, a bit more blue to add to the lower parts, so the bottoms of the petals, just to increase the perception of depth there. And I'm just doing that with all the petals. I'm trying to make sure that you could separate the petals when you can distinguish one petal from the other. So with this one on the right hand side, I'm just leaving a tiny bit of a white or a very light rose border to it. So I'm just, going back and forth between the purple with a bit more blue, and the pure magenta to form the petals of that tulip. Now that I pretty much have my flower with all the petals done, I'm going to cast the shadow of the petal, and by that I just use all of the remaining blues, grays, and purples together that I have on my palette, and I'm just going for a slight shadow that the left petal casts on an imaginary table or other kind of surface, being very smooth and very well, fade with the color, fading it out quite a bit, not having a very strong shadow there. You see I'm adding quite a bit of water to drag any pigments for as wide and as long as I can. I also add a tiny bit on the right hand side, and then I gotta peel away that bit of strip there because I had to paint the rest of the shadow. So this pretty much only, it's not really a shadow, but it's just something that ties the tulip, though I'm going to cut it, to the background in the end. So as one of the last things, I'm going to add a bit more of that purple or magenta, I should say. It's actually pure red magenta to some parts of the tulip where you have the strongest color on the petal, the strongest red colors. Just to add a bit of a bang there, something that's vibrant and, well, in your face, but in a good way, you know, not like ugh, but color that well, that's just lovely to look at, I think. So now that I got my flower done, I'm going back to the background, and that light gray layer there is completely dry. You can hardly see it. I thought the solid gray background would be so boring, so I got out some of my board game stencils, and I'm just using that big circle here with the same gray tones, and I'm creating some circles in the background. I really like these stencils from board games where you punch out all the components. You have so many different shapes and sizes, and they are perfect for painting. So I really like using those cardboard pieces from all the games that we own, and it's just a lovely thing. So I'm going for different kinds of grays, and I'm trying to be lighter on the upper left hand side and going a tiny bit darker the more I move to the lower right hand side. You will also see that some of the circles are more on the blue end of the scale, some are more on the really black and white gray kind of end of the spectrum here, but I try to stay in the bluish or in the cold grays as much as I can. There will be some parts that will look more on the warm gray side of the scale, so there a tiny bit of brown just snuck in there, but I'm using the remaining colors on my palette only, just watering them down really very, very well, and by quote-unquote mudding them, so mixing all of the colors together, so I eventually get a muddy grayish color. I'm not adding a lot of new color there, just really the remains of whatever I do have on my palette. So I'm trying to have 3 circles in a row, and I'm having them alternate. So the thing that I thought it could be would either be a funny wallpaper that you see in the background, or it could be a lamp. So my brother, for example, has that long lamp that hangs from the ceiling, so it's maybe 2.5 meters long, where you have a light bulb pretty much on the upper part in the middle, and all around in a circle there are lines of shells, like seashells, or these Tiffany that you know from the Tiffany lamps, like the turtle shells. So they are round and just hanging there all around that light bulb, and they diffuse the light and also reflect it a bit. So it's a very lovely, very cozy kind of a light that this lamp makes in the room, and I really like it. So maybe these circles here are just a part of such a lamp. So it's up to you and your imagination what you see in these gray circles that I'm painting there. I think that they just well, make the background be more alive and more interesting. They just add something to look at rather than a simple plain one-colored smooth background. I think the contrast between that lively tulip and a solid gray background would just be too harsh, or it would look like a postcard and not like a painting that I want to do with where I want to say something or tell something. I don't know if you know what I mean. I know I'm not making really much sense now, but I think this background with those weird circles, if it tells a story, it would tell more of a story than a solid background. That's all. And also it's just something nice to do. It's I don't want to have a copy of, for example, the page that I made with the word of the year, the content page. I don't want to copy it. There I had a very solid, very smooth, very laid back background, and I didn't want to go for the same thing again. So there's also one reason why I went for the circles instead and just created something different there. So you can see here on the left hand side I'm going pretty much into the blues already. Very cool, very bluish gray, and on the top there I do have quite the light gray. So now that I do have all of my circles there, I think I do. Half of a circle is missing, right? There were only 2 on a row, and that's not acceptable. So I had to add 1 more, and it's a half circle only. And this is something that I like, actually. And that's also something why I did not start with the circles on one of the edges of the paper, but pretty much in the middle, and then worked my way to the outer parts of the page. Some of the circles are not complete on the page, so I really like it. It feels more natural to me and my weird, crazy eye. So I actually like that some of the circles seem to go off into nowhere, and you could imagine this pattern going on in a bigger scale. So now that I do have all of the circles on my background, I'm just going over the every one of them, defining some of the parts, intensifying a bit more of the color, and well, quote unquote shading them. I'm not really putting a shadow in there, but I'm giving it a bit of a 3D dimension by going over parts of the circles, and then some being quite faded, like a light reflection or something. I gotta answer an email while I voice over. I'm sorry if you hear me taka taka on my keyboard. I try to stay quiet. Okay, enough of the typing. Just had to answer a customer quickly. Sorry about that. But that's pretty much life on this video here. It's set in stone forever. So it's not really a lot of technique or things that go into defining parts of the circles, but I think that tiny bit and adding that, well, different shade of gray there and just intensifying colors on some parts of those circles makes them look more like bulbs, giving them a bit more of a dimension or a depth. And I'm going to add a bit of a string to those bulbs later, or to those balls. They're actually not bulbs. I'm going to add some string to them later. So with that together, it really looks like you have some kind of a decoration, it being a light, so a lamp, or just some dream catcher or whatever hanging there behind the tulip. I'm really happy, by the way, since this is the last art journal page for January, I can have kind of a recap of January already. I'm very happy with the pages that I created that month, and looking back now and thinking about it, I used a lot of watercolor. Not a lot of acrylics, not a lot of markers, no pastels. Just a lot of watercolor and a tiny bit of paper piecing and acrylics. So there, I seem to have a theme media-wise this month that was laying down the basics by using watercolors. So really like that. There are some weeks or some months where I don't go even near watercolors, where I'm all about acrylics or all about markers, all about paper. But lately, since I rediscovered watercolors last year sometime, I think it was second half of the year, that I got back into the medium. I really like working with them. I don't remember if I worked the same way, like using them the same way back then when I started, or when I used watercolors for the first period of my painting career. I don't remember, I can't recall. So by the way, just trying on the painting, and now it's time to add the tulip, and I'm going to cut all around the petals there, which is slightly sped up and not too interesting, so I can keep on talking about the watercolor thing. I don't remember if I use them the same way, if I use the blending techniques that I use now, that I actually learned from pastel chalk and markers or colored pencils, and not necessarily by watercolors. I don't remember. I'm really curious if you ever had that thing where you used the medium quite early on in your artistic endeavors, and then didn't use it for a long time, maybe a decade or longer, and then you came back to it and you didn't start from scratch again, but it was pretty much starting where you stopped, with being comfortable with the medium and the way that you use it, how you blend things, any technical aspects of using paint. I'm really curious because for the life of me, I can't remember how I used them first time round. So it's been so many years. It's been more than 20 years that I used watercolors before I rediscovered them last year. So I got my tulip cut. I did leave the shadow because, again, like I said, I wanted to have them blend into the gray bulbs there, or the balls there. I could have cut it and it would have looked nice, but then I would have had to have a shadow or something on the background underneath the petal there, and I didn't feel like doing that. So with my permanent marker here with a small tip, I'm just sketch lining around the petals just to add some illustration-y look to the piece. I'm going to have markers on other parts of the page later on. As I already mentioned, I'm going to add something on the balls there. So I thought I'd use some permanent marker also on the tulip, just to have repetition with the medium and just to make it look well, more harmonic, if you know what I mean. It's just a tiny detail there, but it just looks nicer and more well-rounded to the eye, I think. So I'm just really going in with sketchy lines, being very rough, not trying to stay on the exact edges of the paper and the petals where I cut them, but giving it that loose illustration-y look there. It also enhances the parts of the tulip, like on the left-hand side. The darker part is where the petal curls in, and those sketchy lines added to these parts actually enhances the look of the petals being curled in. So here are the very tiny bows and strings that I'm just going to add to those balls that make it look like some decorational piece that is in the background. It's just so few lines there and it looks totally different, at least to my eye. So this is the major part of the painting done, and now it's just gluing down the piece and adding some tiny details and my sentiment here and there. So I'm pretty much done with watercolors, and it's time to get my glue, and there I am. Took a while. I'm just using normal craft glue. I'm using a liquid glue, which I don't usually do if I go paper to paper, especially with watercolor mixed media papers. But I was just too lazy to pull out my sticky strip, and I thought that my normal snail tape wouldn't hold the watercolor paper down for longer periods of time since it wants to curl a bit. I thought I'd go with a stronger adhesive there just to make sure that in 2 weeks the paper doesn't want to come loose. So I'm just adding that and gluing down that piece of paper to the lower right hand side, and I'm lining up the paper with the edge of the background paper there, so I don't want to have a frame or anything. Just to make sure that I don't have any glue on the next page, I'm having my plexiglass sheet behind the current piece of paper that I'm working on, and now I can really press down hard, and if glue drops and spills on the edges, it won't ruin the next paper there. Just some safety measurements there. So now that I do have my tulip in place, I want to separate it a tiny bit from the background. I want to make sure that you as a viewer can see that it actually is a separate piece of paper and a separate layer. So I thought I'd use my white permanent marker just to go all around the tulip, but for whatever reason it was not really opaque. I think there's just not enough ink in there so that I could have a solid white line. So in the end, I just decided to go with gouache, which I do have only in white opaque, and I really like to work with it on watercolors. Most of the times I use acrylic zinc white, which is a transparent acrylic color, which is very nice to use for highlights on watercolors. But if I want to go real opaque, I'd have to choose gouache. And I'm fighting a bit more with my acrylic markers here. I don't even know if it's permanent marker. I think it's some kind of a varnish or lacquer in there. Don't even know what's in those pens. But in the end, I just gave up and got some gouache straight out of the container onto my paper there. I could have also glued the tulip down onto some white cardstock or white, I don't know, 100-gram paper, and have cut that with maybe 2 millimeters around the tulip, but I was just too lazy for that. Sometimes I do not go for the clean and nice looks, but the ones that are quicker. It's just, yeah, that's just so me. Especially when it comes to my art journal, I sometimes like to go quote-unquote quick and dirty instead of having everything look polished and nice. So here I am going all around the tulip with my gouache and having a solid, nice border all around the flower. I'm going to enhance it later on with my black permanent marker, but I have to add all of the white gouache first and having it dried. I'm also going around the shadow, by the way, on the lower part of the piece here, just to make it look nice and solid. So now that I have dried off the gouache, I'm going all around that border with my black permanent marker in a faux stitch, which actually adds some, again, illustration-y touch to the painting. It could, well, it almost looks like it's sewn on, but then again, if you only glance at the page, it could also look like a solid line there, so like a solid outline instead of a faux stitch. I don't have too many gaps or too large gaps in between each faux stitch there. Now that I got that in place, I want to write down my sentiment, and I chose this dark red Copic marker to go for the word color. And I'm using my black permanent markers for the rest of the sentiment. And the sentiment in the end says, color against winter drabness. And me not being native English, I have to look up the German word triste oder Tristheit. I have to look that up on my dictionary. That's why the iPad's coming in a second. And that actually is the German translation for drabness. So, learned something there. I love technology though. It's really, really cool. Like within a second I can check what any word means in any other language. So cool. So I'm writing that down with my thin black marker as well. And once I have that whole sentiment there, I thought the black part of the wording, it just looks too thin. It almost fades against the color, which it's supposed to do, but I still want the rest of the sentiment after color be visible. So I took just the same kind of pen, but with a thicker tip, and just went all over the black words again. And then I'm almost at the end, and hooray, I can actually manage to almost screw up the whole page by wanting to add some highlights or some more interest on the word color, and using the white permanent marker from earlier in this page. And for whatever reason, probably because the ink was still wet of the Copic marker, there was no solid opaque line there, but it pretty much got sucked into the red, and then it did look pretty. So gosh, I was so anxious, like, no, I don't want to cover the whole thing up and create something that goes on top just because I messed up with the white marker. And I was really, really anxious. You can see how it actually is sucked in, you see? And it just looks like pink now and not even red anymore. So I'm just going over the whole thing with a bigger tip of the marker, increasing the size of the capital C, and that pretty much saves the painting. I'm toning down the white there. You can still see it if you look closely, but yeah. Then I thought, well, I'd go around the letters with my white colored pencil, and you can't see anything. So yeah, didn't do any more than that. It was really invisible. Did nothing to the letter or the background. And then I'm just going around the capital C with a white marker just to, well, have the white come up close to the red color again. And so the screw up in the middle of the letter could actually look like it was supposed to be there. Again, I'm adding some more watercolor in a second, and you can't really see it, or your eye is not, your view is not drawn to the sea in the end, so it's okay, but I almost messed up there. So I'm just cleaning up a bit of my desk, and then I'm just going to splash some of that red color all across the page, having funny patterns that look like blood or just vibrant red color being splattered all over the page, just to add some other patterns, some more interest, and then that's that. So I thank you very much for watching along of this page coming together. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you just want to leave a statement, your opinion of the page, something that you might have done different or something that you like, just leave your comment in the comment section below. I very much appreciate that. And I will see you next week with a new art journal page. Then it's February, and I'm very curious what the new challenge is going to be, and if it's going to be my first attempt or my first February page, or if I have to get more inspired and have it later in the month. So thanks again for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and want to see daily art videos or board game or cooking videos. I thank you very much. Have a very good one. Go create, and I'm going to see you. Goodbye.